All right. So I have really been looking forward to our today's guest. I think you are absolutely going to love him. Dr. Roger Teel, for over 25 years, he was the senior minister at Mile High Church and their spiritual director. He has built a ministry to over 10,000 members and friends. He's written the book that we're going to talk about in a moment. He's Life is a Joy. I have had the opportunity to travel with him when we were on the board together at AG&T, to Italy, to be in the presence of the Dalai Lama. Roger is such a dear, sweet, powerful man. He brings this goodness, this overflowing goodness to everything I've ever seen him do. And so I want to talk to Roger today because I believe in the world today, we need more of the goodness that Roger lives. I mean, he lives it, he embodies it. That's who he is. So Roger, it is absolutely our great joy to welcome you to the Rise community today. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for just sharing your light with the world.
Hey, thank you, Brother Richard. It's a real joy, everybody who's here. I could say the same thing about Richard, he's a phenomenal being and one I love. And we had such a great time, and we deepened and learned so much in our collaboration with the Association for Global New Thought. And I'm glad to see he's still doing powerful stuff in the world. Good job, Richard.
Thank you, Roger. So let's talk about, I want to start with your spiritual life. And I want to talk about how you got to be you, because you had a spiritual experience as a child that impacted your life. Are you willing to talk about that and share that?
Oh, sure. I write about it in my book. It was one I didn't understand at the time. I was 6 at the time, and I was laying out on our front lawn. My dad had just mowed the lawn, and I was just staring up at the sky and everything. And then all of a sudden, it was as though I was gone. I had died, or I thought I had died. I didn't know. I was no more. I was everything I was seeing. It was the clouds, the sky, the sun, everything. And I don't even know how long that went on. Time dissolved. And when it was over, I was deeply frightened, and yet at the same time filled with energy. I remember clutching the grass just to get my vibrations settled, and I was just shaking, and I hid it away for a long time because I was frightened by it. Only later did I realize that that's an experience many folks have. It's a sort of a transpersonal stepping out of the I, the personal I, into the universal. But it launched me on a search, even though I did not understand it whatsoever then. I would only later understand it. And I searched through many churches. All of a sudden, I wanted to go to church, which surprised my parents because at the time they weren't churchgoers. And they just said, well, there's lots of churches in the neighborhood. If you want to walk to any of them, you can. And I did. And I tried out some things. And I liked just that it was spiritual energy. But the older I grew, as the years advanced, what seemed to be going on in me and what I was hearing, just they did not meet. And so I began searching more ardently, as I became a teen. And I had the rare distinction of being kicked out of Methodist church confirmation classes because I asked way too many questions, difficult questions, persistent questions. I remember meeting for 2 hours with the minister, and at the end of it, he was so flustered and red that he just said, we've had enough here. About that time, my mother had discovered the Religious Science Church, very similar to Unity, if you're familiar with that, in Denver here. The one I would eventually serve, Mile High Church. And it was meeting in a theater at the time, and she just loved it. And she kept saying, you really ought to go to this. And I kept saying, I don't know about church. But about that time, she asked her membership to be shifted over to Mile High Church from that Methodist church. And the minister wrote her a letter and saying, I think this is a grave mistake for your spiritual welfare, but I'll agree as you've requested. And by the way, since your son seems to hold ideas alien to our church, we'll drop him from the membership rolls as well. And that just pissed me off. I got to be quite honest with you. And that further just made me conclude at that early age that churches were bogus, ministers were frauds. And I resisted going to Mile High for a good year until I think it was a Mother's Day, maybe a birthday of my mom's. I can't remember which. And I decided to go ahead, and the die was cast. All of a sudden, it linked in. What intuitively, whatever had been downloaded, whatever I'd slipped into or attuned to, and what the message was met beautifully. And so I just dived right in. And the rest is history. Went to college, then our seminary, and had my first ministry in Portland, Oregon for 3 years before returning to Mile High as an associate minister. And then later on, my journey led me to being senior minister. So that's it in a nutshell. But, it just is, for me, an example that there's something seated in every one of us. And eventually we connect with that. And eventually we follow its bidding, even if we don't know where we're going or what it is. There's that something that calls, that something that pulls us.
So talk to us about what you see as the core teaching of New Thought.
Let's see. Well, at its core, we're privileged to be in a teaching that helps us realize, or maybe better yet, remember that this is a spiritual universe and everyone is a spiritual being capable of creating a rich and fulfilling life and making a difference in this world. To me, that's the core of it. And I know, I think that there's many different chapters that a student in New Thought goes through. And I think at first, sometimes new people come in and it's time to get their lives working because they're not working. Or it's they study deeply to create that, or to find that fulfillment that their hearts have longed for, filling the sense of spiritual loneliness or emptiness. And I think that many can just stay at that level, but I think the greatest level, the end game of New Thought, is to be about helping create the kingdom of heaven on earth, to help in our own way to shine our lights and to in some way be a beacon, if only that we just live this teaching authentically and congruently wherever we go, and in our transactions with others, that we represent this core teaching that everybody is sacred and that there are higher answers always available, and that fear doesn't need to dominate our consciousness, that we actually can learn to live from a basis of love rather than fear. So I think that's the end game, and I know we're all on that path in our own unique way.
So when you talk about the kingdom, what can you talk to us more about that? What you see the kingdom is?
Well, Jesus said on earth, create on earth as it is in heaven. On earth as it is in the mind of God. For us to sense the nature and the essence of the divine and fashion a world that exudes it, that has love as its basis, that knows every being is a beautiful being, and that finds solutions in the greater ideas of the divine mind, rather than just the recapitulation of human thinking as far as it's gone. There's always more. There's always what we don't know. And to seek our solutions and opening to radically new ideas. And really it's to help everybody realize that the kingdom of heaven is the kingdom of ever expanding good. And we can all enter into that. We can come home like the prodigal son and feel the embrace of love and our worthiness. And I think that's a key blessing of this teaching, isn't it? That finally we get to dissolve whatever degree of unworthiness and inadequacy each of us picked up along the way. of our journey. Whatever grieves the spirit, as it says in the Bible, and whatever shrouds the glory and the beauty of our being, that we get to dissolve that, not just for our private good, but because that's the collective journey of everyone. And the world gets to be a better place when people find happiness.
Mm.
I mean, happy people don't take pleasure in polluting the earth. Happy people don't tear other people down. Happy people don't rip people off. Truly happy people support, sponsor the joy of others. Happy people love to be creative. Happy people are powerful people in the world. And it's wounded people that tend to create a lot of the havoc, whether they're aware of their woundedness or not. So you wound me up, Richard. You better tell me to pause.
No, I want you to keep going. And in fact, I want you to talk about, so you hold this high spiritual ideal of what we're driving toward, right? That's what I hear, right? That you have a vision of possibility for the world that isn't fully being actualized currently. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it is.
And how do we?
I would add this though. Let me just add this.
Okay.
I happen to also think that we're in the process of transformation. We just don't know it.
Okay. So how do we not get discouraged, disgruntled, upset, disappointed in the divisiveness and the conflict that we also see present in this process that we're in?
Well, first of all, I don't know if it's entirely possible not to get discouraged at times. And I pretty much feel like we need to own whatever space we drop into, but we don't stay stuck there.
Okay.
We recognize when a state is just a natural human emotion. We embrace that with some self-compassion, but then we realize there's a higher place for me to go to. And one thing, I'm teaching a course right now on spiral dynamics, which I've studied for about 15 years. And it's about the upward spiral of consciousness. It was created by a guy named Clare Graves and some of his disciples. And it's all about how there are various sectors on this ever ascending spiral of consciousness that has been a part of human evolution. And that every level, I mean, it started out at a basic, even pre-rational level of survival, just pure survival. But then consciousness kept evolving. And the way consciousness evolves is that problems emerge that the current level of consciousness cannot solve. Mm. And so what that does is those problems intensify to the degree that it precipitates breakthroughs in consciousness for those willing to be the avenue for that. And so that's the only solution. They've created problems that can't solve, so it requires an entirely wider, more complex, a greater scope of consciousness to solve it. And that's how we have evolved. And I believe that's going on right now. I believe we are letting things evolve because, we seem to be a species that learns by urgency, crisis, and necessity rather than realization. Maybe that's the next higher states, is that eventually we'll decide, there's something better here and we don't have to wait for breakdown to create our breakthrough. But currently, that's what we're requiring. And for instance, we had the COVID experience where the idea that you can separate yourself off in a comfy little nation state and let the rest of the world go to hell in a handbag. Well, all of a sudden, a virus that includes all of humanity breaks out. We realize we're not immune. We're not isolated from all of this. And many other things, the climate change that's going on. That's no respecter of boundaries and nations. And so what this is all leading to is eventually we have to come together in a higher mode of thinking. The tribal, demonizing modes of thinking cannot solve the problems, and the problems aren't going away. They're just intensifying toward the next breakthrough. And one other bit of good news in that, kind of like the old 100th monkey theory, it doesn't take 50% of humanity to allow this breakthrough to come forth, because the next level is always a higher power. It contains higher power possibilities than the former one. So it may only take 6, 7, 8, at most 10% of humanity to grasp this before there's a shift. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody goes along, but the power shifts and the options open up in a new way. So for me, I avoid discouragement by realizing that our crisis is our birth. As our dear friend Barbara Hubbard, you remember her, Richard, on our AG&T team.
Right.
That was her big thing, is that our crisis is our birthing, our birth pains. And so all of us in this kind of teaching can be a part of, first of all, integrating this understanding and thinking in higher terms than the we, they. There's a lot of that going on now, the polarization, the attacking. It's so seductively easy to get drawn into. And there are ideas we prefer over others. So it doesn't mean that we park our minds at the door.
Mm-hmm.
But what we can do is ask, what is the bigger circle of awareness that I can explore and inhabit that embraces these polarities, so that I'm just not a part of the battle? I mean, I may, again, agree with certain sides, but what's the larger scope? If you imagine two little dots and they're the warring idea systems, what's the circle around them in our awareness? That's the special gift that New Thought can begin to explore. And I think it's intrinsic in our teaching that there's a higher awareness. And it's not going to be born out of the clash. It'll be born out of exploring what's the bigger arena around that. Maybe you remember, Richard, and I wrote about this in the book too, in our last synthesis dialogue with His Holiness, and how before he arrived, he always arrived midweek, and we had the earlier part of the week to work with our invited guests and look at the social issues, spiritual issues, what we wanted to delve into, and we would work on that, and then he would arrive and we'd share it and keep evolving it even to a higher level. So in this one, in Italy, we had arrived and we were doing check-in. The thing hadn't even started yet. And you remember that we had some people rush up to us, all concerned that there was this enormous argument that had broken out on the steps leading up to the conference area. And it was that this passionate Jewish rabbi we'd invited, young Jewish rabbi, had come upon this equally passionate young Muslim journalist from Canada. And the two of them, they just started battling right there, arguing, yelling. And we had to intervene and say, wait a minute. Let's pause. Let's bring this into our work. And so once we had the first session and had the festivities to open and everything, we put them together. And for a full day and a half, the argument just kept going on. I mean, one person would say, you people did this, and then the other had a comeback for that. Yeah, but before that, you guys did this, and you did this. And it was just bam, bam, bam. And I remember we in the convening body were, I think, thinking like, what have we begun here? And where are we going to take this thing? And how is this going to lead to something constructive? Well, we had a guy there named Bill Urey. I remember him from Boulder, and he wrote The Third Side. And his whole theory was that groups need to learn how to hold the third side between two quarreling sides or two battling sides. What's the third side? The larger container. And so he said, I advise you conveners to do that and to ask third side questions. And so we went back and we held that consciousness, we prepared ourselves, and then somebody asked them to talk about how these centuries of strife hurt. What was the pain? And they each articulated their pain, their personal and collective pain. And it was identical. Then we asked them, what are your dreams for your children and your children's children? Their dreams were identical. Richard, if you remember, they were in each other's arms, and we were in that session. And I remember that they became inseparable for the whole conference. They ate lunches and meals together. They were always around. something deeper than the clash of opposites had connected them. And that's what I believe we're capable of.
And I think for us as conveners, because I remember the night before where we were up very late trying to discuss how we were going to get our arms around this thing. It was an affirmation that what we teach actually works if we have the faith to let it go.
Yeah.
Right? If we don't stop the process, if we stay in the game, if we stay in the conversation, there is a higher path that is revealed. And I remember all of us just in a state of almost euphoria that we trusted the process and we got to watch it work itself out right in front of our eyes.
Yeah. And quite frankly, those two did us a huge gift, bringing us in a metaphor for humanity's struggle to get along and work together.
And it was almost like their two souls had a predestined commitment to take the whole group higher, right? And that's right. And that's really what happened. So let's talk about your book, because I want to get to your book, because your book's very good. And so I want to talk about what you see as the key points in your book and how we can assimilate them in our life.
It's a big book. Maybe if I had to do it again, I'd write it in 3 books rather than 1 book. But it's got a section that is just basic New Thought teaching, but from my own lens, and using lots of metaphors from my life and from other people's lives. It starts out with "This instant is love," and it keeps talking about what's really true about this world is consciousness. This thought is substance, and it goes on and on. This journey is surrender. And the last part of part 1, the last chapter, is the namesake of the book, "This life is joy." And then the second section takes on a lot of the biggest challenges people face and adds that it's something more than that. For instance, this fear is friend. This problem is possibility. This uncertainty is magic. This disease is discovery. And so it hits on a lot of the things that are struggle points for us all, and opens up a bigger arena about what it really is, or what it can be. And then the last section is really about the driving force in my own spiritual advancement, and that's the heart. And so this mastery is heart is the last section, and I talk about heart opening. I even write a heart opening process that one in reading could do. And so really, I think the book is about the higher possibilities around everything that we don't often see. So that's it. But basically also, it's about this life being a joyous dance of the spirit. And once we find it, spiritual joy, I'm not talking about the pleasure pain cycle where people have a little pleasure and they try to sustain that with everything they got, but then it fades because everything changes. And then they find themselves in discomfort and maybe even pain. And then they turn to numbing the pain and then scraping to create a little more temporary pleasure. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a deep joy of the spirit, that our being is the joy, the dance, the creativity, and the energy of the all that is, as is everything else. And we get so often so caught up in our stuff that we lose track of this dance of joy at our core and all around us, and that there's power in this joy. We're disempowered when we're puppets of fear, very disempowered. And so that's another core thing, but that's basically the book in a nutshell.
So let's talk about heart. So we all know that we're called to be more loving people, right? But how do we? Can you give us some help on how do we do that in a real and tangible way?
we each have a vortex of spiritual power. It is the heart. It's physically centered just below the center of our chest. And yet that's the physical center for the non-spiritual reality of our being and all being. So for me, the heart is an activation point and a portal. When I warm the heart, when I take my energy, I just stop keeping my energy up here and I just gently allow it to rest in the heart. It naturally begins to warm and to quicken. And it begins to shift me. And if I keep moving with the heart, maybe even breathing in and out as though I'm breathing in and out of the heart and allowing it to continue to open, it ushers me into the transcendent self. It ushers me into my higher self or authentic self. Many folks think that the soul or the higher self is somewhere stuffed inside their body. I believe the body is inside of the self, inside of the soul, or inside of the higher self. That when we go through this portal of the heart, we merge into the unbounded beingness of us. We merge into that part of us which has healing energies, which is joyous, which is creative, which is peaceful, which is spacious. And we need to get home to that. That you ask what heaven is, that there you have it. And this transcendent self is afloat in the infinite ocean of divine love intelligence and receives from it. So for me, the heart takes me out of the clutches of fear and all the limited bandwidths of consciousness that is about fear, and into the higher self and the higher love. And man, that's when I start hitting on all 8 cylinders. That's when I know the peace that passeth all understanding. And that's where great ideas, and also that's where great dreams come along. I've got now that I'm retired, or I told my congregation in 2019, I was entering rewirement, not retirement, but rewirement. And now that I'm in rewirement, I have my own Roger Teel Ministries, and in association with our dear friend, Mary Morrissey, I do dream building work, among many other things, personal consultation work and all that. And in that, we help people work with their dreams, not the shoulds that many of us acquired as we were growing up and thinking, oh, that person's powerful, I should do that kind of thing. Or people said, you should do this, you should get lots of money, and that's the key to your joy. You got to get this, you do this, all this. A lot of shoulds, and a lot of folks default to that when they think about dreaming for their life. I ask them to go to their heart. I ask them to set aside all the shoulds and inquire into the musts of the heart. What does my heart want to bring forth? And very often it can be totally a 180 from what's going on now. Story of a guy that was a really well-paid, effective computer scientist, and bringing in tons of money. He worked a lot, but he was providing everything for his family, incredible home, cars, any camps or anything they wanted to go to. But he wasn't fulfilled. And he did some of this work. And when he got really still and really gave his heart permission, he realized that what he'd always wanted to do was raise and sell the best orchids he could sell. And when he took that to his family, he thought, they're not going to like this. This isn't good for them. My dream's got to be good for everybody, not just me. But when he took it to the family, they got all elated and excited. He said, we want you to do this. We want you to do this. We don't get to see you. And he had 2 boys that were quickly growing up. We want to help you with your dream. We want you to do this. So he did. In the course of time, he resigned, sold the house, downsized, bought some land, and set up greenhouses. I've got a feeling he's doing it today. So the heart also links us to our authentic uniqueness that wants to get out. So for me, the heart. When I had my massive heart opening and working with a wonderful teacher named Brew Joy,
Mhm.
everything in my life enriched. I finally stopped having counterproductive relationships where I was keeping people at a distance and controlling things and was a workaholic and making any woman willing to be with me miserable most of the time, wanting access to me they couldn't have. My relationship started flowering. And then finally I had the brilliance to turn around and see Erica at church. And I knew, my heart told me, here she is. And her husband had died 2 years earlier, and she had decided to move from where they had lived. She'd been grieving, but keeping things solid. But now it felt like it's time to open in for the next chapter. So she moved to Denver and saw her at church. And my biggest challenge was I wanted to get to know her, but I didn't want her to think I was one of those ministers. You know what I'm talking about? So I buddied up to our boys. I've adopted them long ago, long ago. Who they were 5 and 8 at the time. I said, hey, you guys, you're so cool. Anytime you're at church, I want you to come find me. They said, okay. I said, and bring your mom. And so I just kept posturing. It took me 2 months to find a way to ask her out. Finally, I did. And the rest is history. 9 months later, we were married. At any rate, that opened my ministry flowered. My talks went from here more to here. My teaching, and it was so much easier and fun. And virtually everything in my life I owe to that time. And if you ever read the book, you'll find out that heart opening with Brew was precipitated by a very powerful wounding, a deep betrayal, a deep hurt in my life. And I could have stayed victim of that. And I could have kept telling what I call the lesser story about that, of how I was done wrong. And I could have fed that thing and it would have drugged me down. I wouldn't be in the ministry now. I don't know if I'd be alive now, because I was angry and hurtful and hateful and sad. But then I had to ask, what's the bigger purpose of this? And what's the larger story about this? And eventually I not only got truthful about the quality of the relationship that ended, but I realized then that the status of my heart. I'd gotten to my early 30s with a closed and protected heart. And so I set about finding a way. And it's the best thing I've ever done. And now the lady who broke up with me, we were planning to get married. For me, she's now an angel. And we met several years later and told our story and hugged, and we haven't seen each other since. But sometimes people come into your life and there's a wounding. There's very often the heart story about this. There's soul making in that wounding. If we can go to a larger story. I'll pause. I've gone on.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So talk to us about the courage it takes when you have been wounded and you're in that decision, am I going to open my heart again? Talk to us about how you did that.
Well, a couple of things happened. First of all, right after that wounding, for the several months following that, things were getting bad for me. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating well. My creativity was zilch. And I was in the ministry then, and I didn't feel great, and I had to put on a look good act. And I was in a dire strait. And thank God, a dear friend who was also a teaching assistant in one of the classes I was teaching asked me if I'd go out and have a beer with him afterward. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And we got our beers, and then I launched into another tirade against this lady. At one point, he said, Roger, there's this stuff called science of mind and spirit. Have you ever thought of using it? I mean, I just come from a class teaching it. And I wanted to knock him off that stool. Oh, I just wanted to level him. I said, you don't know what this is like. You don't know how hard this is. Loved her and all of this stuff. He said, I know. He said, I know. And I love you too, but I just think you're screwing your life up big time. You really are. And, you got to take a look at this. There's something more here. So every once in a while, that's a second angel in that whole story, comes along and won't accept your pity party anymore. I mean, there's a time we all get to wallow in pity, but we need to set a deadline to quit it and look at what else we can be and do. And he did. And it started me on a search and honesty. And so I did a little therapy, but more than anything, my mentor, Fred Vogt, had been studying with Brew in years past. And he said, I think Brew's got what you need. And Brew was an incredible guy. He was one of the nation's most elite young doctors, but then he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And he knew that he wasn't going to solve that with Western medicine. So he dived into alternative means, energy work, heart chakra work. He cured himself twice of that. And so he left the medical profession and became one of the greatest spiritual facilitators, and especially of the heart chakra. But I think the courage is to stop trying to squeeze understanding and fulfillment from fear and anger. Stop trying to find a justification in our woundedness and move out of the clutches of blame. And rather than saying it's all my fault, it's not our fault, it's our opportunity. It's like, so why did I draw this into my life? I don't believe that there are circumstances in our life are accidents. I believe that especially the big turning points, the most meaningful points, they're there by divine appointment. I feel like we draw them in. You see, you mean you draw in pain? Well, yeah. I mean, I drew in a beautiful person that I loved dearly, and then it went south in a shocking way. But I needed that because it wasn't a real productive relationship. It was a dependency, but it was also an avenue by which I could do the work I came to this planet to do. I don't know if that speaks to what you were.
Oh, it absolutely does. And I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability and talking about it from that depth, because, sometimes life it hurts.
It does.
Right. And we can get so in the pain of the moment that we don't move forward at the level that maybe we could. And so when you're willing to share that you've been in that pain, you know what that pain feels like. You mentally can be fully justified in staying in that pain, but you share the story of how moving through that pain changed your life.
Yeah.
I mean, it inspires all of us. It inspires all of us to take our next step and not allow the pain of the past to really keep us from the good that God has for us today. So I appreciate it. I love that level of honesty and clarity that you bring to conversations, because you are willing to be completely honest about what's going on for you. And
well, the truth of it also is, Richard, that you set the field in this thing, and that's how you've always been. You've been one of the most vulnerable, honest ministers and people I've had the pleasure of being around. I mean, you don't hide out in illusion, and I've always loved about you. So you see, I just stepped into this field you've created, man.
Well, thank you for doing it then. All right, let's open it up to questions, because I want to. We've got this giant spiritual teacher in our midst, and I want to make sure that if you guys have questions for him, that you get your questions asked. So let's form it in the form of a question. And Jeff, you want to go first? What's your question?
I just have the real life experience that can't be formed in a question. If I have time to share it at the end, that'll be great. I lived what Dr. Teel and I lived through just recently, and really hard on Thursday, and getting through it thanks to your phenomenal Wednesday presentation on finding joy, which was amazing. And the work and what he's saying is so true. And I got through something that I had a weekend of just kind of horror, making me feel sorry for myself, come out through you and then through this presentation. And I just want to thank you. That's all I have to say. I don't have a question, because the question was answered just by listening to you guys. So thank you. That's all I'll say.
Well, Jeff, what I want to add is that there's a nugget of gold in that experience for you. So just just keep moving on with that vision of.
There's been nuggets of gold that came almost during it, and the fact that I recuperated so fast after it, and it's been shining down for the last few days. So it's
Beautiful.
been pretty amazing. I'm lucky. So thank you for saying that. 'Cause that's even true. So thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. All right. Anybody else got a question for Dr. Roger Teel? Colleen, go ahead. Unmute.
My question is, I understand your understanding and expression about being joyful, about recognizing that we are spiritual beings in a spiritual universe. But how do you bring that down to the nitty-gritty daily level? How do you get up in the morning if your back hurts and you look in the mirror and you say, oh man, I do not look good today? How do you get beyond that to say, today I'm going to be filled with joy and make everybody around me happy through that joyfulness?
Well, first of all, I think that you articulate it so well. I think if you set an intention to do what you ask how to do, that intention is the large part of it. I always remind myself of the tremendous power of gratitude practices. Because, our lives are far more blessed than our problems in most cases. And so I think that's a starting point, is gratitude for the many blessings we have, as well as it's not only gratitude for, but gratitude in. In everything, give thanks, it says in Thessalonians, in everything. So how can I be grateful in the midst of this problem? I can be grateful that I'm also more fundamentally in the midst of an infinite intelligence that can show me what I don't even know yet, has a bigger idea and greater energies for me to use. And so it's gratitude that can be a good one. And maybe some activities that just involve play, whatever play is for you. It's like we have these problems in our life, and we slam the door on the inner child, and the child just wants to come out and play, but we've got all these serious things going on. And that child, quite frankly, has our power. That child is the source of our playfulness, our sensitivity, our openness, joy. So to have some activities that are, whatever it is for you, that lights your fire of joy, playfulness, I would encourage that too. So maybe that's a way to get
story,
involved.
because as you were talking about play, if you remember a story, we were walking through the Italian countryside before the Synthesis Dialogue started, and it was Howard, you and I, and our wives, and one of the Ripoches. Do you remember the story? And we're walking through the countryside, and we're in the discussion about what that tree is or what that plant is. And in the Italian countryside, every home had their own little garden, and they were planting things. And us city kids were failing badly at actually naming what the tree or the vegetable was that was growing. And finally, the Ripoche turned to us and without any malice, just straight up said, "How do you people feed yourself?" And it was it was because we were so used to going to the grocery store and seeing the end product and not what the tree or the bush looked like there. And I will never forget the six of us going, "Oh my gosh, we couldn't survive on a farm. We would be in so much trouble." And that story always just makes me laugh.
And it was hilarious. I think we laughed for 5 minutes, if not more.
Right. And just
you don't expect this holy llama to turn around and say, "How do you people feed yourself?"
Right. It was like, well, okay, I guess we are just spending way too much time doing things that are unnecessary.
I really want to recommend that we get back in touch with our playful side. And I see this in my wife, Erica. She, for 15 years or so, has been an improv teacher and performer. She loves improv comedy. She started a long time ago. We brought Alan Arkin to Mile High to do a public talk. And he said, I'll do your talk, but then I want to do a weekend workshop on improv. So a Saturday and a Sunday afternoon. And many of us didn't even know what that was. And so our events director was having a hard time filling that. And then he only wanted, say, 20 people. And he'd had hundreds at his talk, but nobody seemed to want to do it. So the director called up Erica and said, would you do it? And Erica said, what is it? But Erica had made our family laugh for years. And I said to Erica, whatever it is, do it. So she did. And then Sunday, when I was doing the talk, before their afternoon session, people kept coming through the line. And they kept saying, your wife, she's a superstar. I mean, she's incredible. And so Arkin pulled her aside afterward and said, you need to be doing this. You should do this. So she studied intensely for about 7 years. And now, but what I get to see in her performances, but more than anything, in her teaching, people come to it and they're scared to death to play. But within 10 minutes, they're in an altered state with the work that she does with them. And now her workshops fill up just like that, because some of these people, and she even has one called Improv for Introverts, because she herself is an introvert. But an introvert doesn't mean you don't play. It just means there comes a time when you need to recharge your batteries alone. And it fills up remarkably too. But she teaches me to play and to get crazy. And there's some very sophisticated principles in the art form called improv. And she teaches them as to how they relate in life. But I would that's a gift I think we could all have is, hey, when do we stop working?
Now, do you think because, we have some pretty sophisticated spiritual principles that we teach, and we tend to bring some pretty intelligent people. Pretty intelligent people are drawn to us.
Yeah.
And I think that the downside for being highly intelligent is sometimes you get too smart for your own good.
Too locked in to your theoretical brain too. Yeah.
Right. And so I think what you're talking about is balancing our big intelligence with equally big playfulness.
Yeah. And I think that's a part of the heart too.
I agree. Right? Because, one of the things I've always enjoyed about ministry, and that is all the kids that are drawn to us.
Oh, yeah.
And when at Unity of Phoenix, and we had such a dynamic youth ministry, and being in that energy always balanced my seriousness, right? Because they could get me playing in a minute, and it was just it's good for my heart. It's good for my soul.
I've always loved your ready humor and your fun-loving side, Richard. I've always loved it.
Yeah.
And I saw Nancy waving her hand.
Okay, go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what you're talking about getting out of the head. One of the great gifts to me was a teacher who said one day, you realize that you're never going to have the solution to anything, much less be able to connect deeply and understand this mystery called God by doing it with your head.
Mm-hmm.
So now, being somebody that took several decades to really focus on that, where can I get some good counseling and teaching to get into this deeper?
Well, give Roger a call.
Well,
Good.
I think your participation in this community and hanging around Rev Richard here you're set.
I'm planning to bug him about being able to be talking to you.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, Roger. All right. Any more questions anybody has?
I have a question.
Okay, Colleen.
Can Roger hold up his book so we can see what it looks like? Is there information about his book?
Yeah, I'll put it in the comment section. I'll send you an Amazon link.
Okay, look, he's gonna get it and show us. Sometimes just see.
There it is.
Oh, it is a big book. Okay, This Life is Joy.
Wow.
But we can read it like it was 3 books, right? Because you said
That's
you
right.
could.
Yeah.
Okay.
It-
Okay.
The
You
good
know
news
what,
is
Cohen, it's just one page at a time.
Right.
the chapters are short.
There you go. All right, Roger. Anything else you'd like to tell us about? If somebody does want to get in contact with you about dream building or coaching, can they go to your website,
Oh, yeah,
rogerteel.com?
it's pretty simple. It's rogerteel.com. It's
Great.
Teel with Teel spelled correctly, Teel.
Yeah, absolutely.
The duck
Right.
and the color, they screwed up on the spelling. But
Right.
Teel.
That's how I feel about people that put D in Rogers, right? It's like we're so close,
Having that first name, Roger, I see that. It's
right?
I cringe. Yeah.
Right? It's, all right. Anything more that you'd like to talk to us about before we close today, Roger?
I want to talk just briefly about the importance of community,
Okay.
because all the major faith paths stress, yes, learn the teachings, then do the practices, and they almost always then talk about be with like-minded, be in community. Buddhism, Sat Chidananda, Sat, and then there's the Ananda is joy, and then that's in Hinduism. Buddhism, it's the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the enlightened state. The Dharma are the practices. Sangha is community. The joy. So I think another thing that helps us keep our nose above water and stay connected to who we are in our hearts, hang out with people. This is a great start, and maybe you can form a little mastermind group if you're not near Unity of Phoenix or some ministry like that. But it's that whole thing where 2 or more are gathered in my name. There I am in the midst of the I am. A whole that's greater than the sum of the parts shows up, and it lifts us. I just completed Sunday a meditation retreat. I do 3 of those through Mile High still a year, and it's 4 days, and we're in this community. And I tell you, all of them said, but the ones who already had a meditation practice said, I just can't believe how more empowered my meditations have been during this. It's like being in the field that we create lifted me to another level. So, we teach a very personal oriented, do your personal work teaching, but I think we sometimes don't stress the importance enough of our communities and to keep our churches and our virtual communities strong, because it's just such a lifeline. And, through COVID, people got out of the habit of it, or out of, and lost connection with the power of being together and sharing together. And so it's time to get out of our pajamas and get back into the community and into the energy of it all. So I just want to thank Richard for this unique community. I'm intrigued by it, and for his service still to Unity of Phoenix and his ministry there. And just all of you, I just want to encourage you. We're not here to go it alone. New Thought people can sometimes do that. But there's this group energy too. That's so important.
Absolutely. Roger, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You are such a spiritual presence and just a genuinely good guy. And I just love and appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Well, let's get together and let's play together, Richard.
Absolutely.
And I'm just glad that this happened after the Nuggets played the Suns.
Yeah.
And that it was.
I was wondering if you were going to slide that in this hour. Is the town is still on fire as it was on Monday night?
Oh yeah, it's really exciting.
Well, your team just ate everybody alive. Went through the Suns, the Lakers, everybody, and it was great to watch.
Well, it's a joy. It was over 50 years coming, and who knows, it may be another 50. Although I think they've got the core to keep going, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I just had to toss that in there, Richard.
Absolutely. Do you think there's any hope for your football team?
Well, no, that may take a little longer right now. We finally got a great coach, and I still believe in Russell Wilson. So we'll see what happens.
All right, my friend. Thank you for being with us. God
My
bless
joy.
you. All right. Thanks so much, Roger.
Love and blessings to you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, you guys. So we have our meditation course that begins on Friday, 10 a.m. If you haven't already registered, go ahead and do that. It's going to be a big course. We've got over 130 people that have already registered for this meditation course. So it's going to be a big course. You will have time to ask me questions before and after, or email me questions. But I think it's really going to be good. I'm real excited about it. Again, it starts Thursday. I mean, Friday. It doesn't start Thursday. It starts Friday at 10 a.m. And then next week, we're doing an open coaching call. So I want you to really think of if there's any way that I can support you on that open coaching call. It will be next Wednesday. And that's where we're going to go. And then we've got just so many great spiritual teachers lined up for you over the next few months that I am really pleased. I think you're really going to be happy with that. All right. Anything else before we close today? All right, you guys. God bless you. Have a great day. And I look forward to seeing you on Friday.
Okay.
Right.